Noah Gragson is a lead candidate to join Farmer Motorsports in 2025, and Aric Almirola was suspended by Joe Gibbs Racing for an altercation with Bubba Walls in a competition meeting. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight on those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a couple paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Sam Mayer's 2024 High Rock Vodka scheme that we're going to see at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Really nice looking paint scheme in my opinion, and it's really cool to see that Sam Mayer does have a new sponsor. He just turned 21 a couple days ago, so happy late birthday to him. Congratulations on the new sponsorship with High Rock Vodka. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Austin Dillon's 2024 Dow Salutes Veteran Scheme that we'll see at Phoenix during championship weekend. Solid looking paint scheme in my opinion. Really cool to see Dow Salutes will be sponsoring Austin Dillon at the end of the year. It looks pretty good. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tyler Reddick's 2024 Jumpman scheme that we're going to see at the Chicago Street Course. I absolutely love this paint scheme. I think 23XI Racing's done generally a really good job this year with their paint schemes. This one's no exception. It looks amazing. Can't wait to see the Jumpman scheme for Michael Jordan, for Tyler Reddick especially, at the Chicago Street Course. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Dawson Cram's 2024 Soaky Mountain scheme that we'll see this weekend at Nashville. Solid looking paint scheme in my opinion. Love the colors in it. I think they did a solid job for JD, even though I'm not a big fan right now. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is John Hunter Nemechek's 2024 Massey scheme that we'll see this weekend at Nashville in a couple of races throughout 2024. Decent looking paint scheme in my opinion. It kind of gives me those little Budweiser vibes. I think it looks really, really solid, and I'm definitely looking forward to see on the racetrack this weekend in a couple of races throughout the 2024 season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the national purse money. Every time we have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity Series, and Truck Race, Bob Pockets puts out the purse money for the event. And according to Bob, for the Cup race, it's $8,915,372. For the Xfinity race, it's $1,420,381. And for the Truck race, it's $897,631. Truck punt money is a little bit, unfortunately, low, sadly. Xfinity's got some decent money for sure, but Cup, because there are some extra non-charter teams showing up, that's why the purse money is up a little bit. It's decent for Cup and Xfinity, but Truck's really not that good in my opinion. That's why the numbers for the people showing up are sadly down. The money is okay for Cup and Xfinity, but not that great for Trucks. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Martin Truex Jr. As it was announced yesterday that Martin Truex Jr. has a new tire changer going into the team, and that is Lee Cunningham. Lee Cunningham, I believe, comes over from Front Row Motorsports and will join the team trying to fix up the issues on pit road. Joe Gibbs Racing has not made a lot of crew changes so far in 2024, but Martin Truex Jr.'s pit crew has been a big problem at points over the course of the last couple of years. Lee Cunningham, I think, has won championships as a tire changer to my understanding, so this is a pretty big pickup for Martin Truex Jr. We'll see if this leads to success, and we'll see if Martin Truex Jr. can get better on pit road, as he is still, by the way, looking for his first win of 2024. We'll see if he can get it done. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Luke Combs. As it was announced yesterday that Luke Combs will be the honorary pace car official during the Ally 400. Luke Combs, of course, has some sort of detail with this week as he will be part of the sponsorship for Bubba Wallace's Columbia scheme. And Luke Combs, I think, is going to be performing some concerts this weekend as well at National Super Speedway. It's really cool to see him getting involved and being part of the Ally 400. He's a pretty big NASCAR fan and has association with NASCAR in the past. Glad to see that he'll be a pace car official for the Ally 400. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Blaney. As it was confirmed by Kelly Crandall that Ryan Blaney has been officially nominated for the ESPYs and is part of the Best Drivers category. This includes Matt Hagan from the NHRA, Alex Palou from IndyCar, and Max Verstappen from Formula One. Personally, if we're going to talk about best drivers, I know Ryan Blaney won the championship last year, but Ryan Blaney was not the best driver last season. If I had to give the honor to anybody for the Cup side, I'd give it to Kyle Larson or William Byron or maybe Martin Truex Jr. That's who should be on it. For the best driver, I think it's going to go to Max Verstappen. He had a 19-win season last year. I think most likely he'll end up winning the best driver. But Ryan Blaney, good to see he at least is nominated for the best, even though I don't think he should have been the one that was nominated, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Valvoline. As it was announced yesterday that Valvoline has signed an extension with Hendrick Motorsports and William Byron through 2029. They'll sponsor William Byron for 8 races throughout the rest of the 2024 season. And starting in 2025, they'll sponsor him for 6 races each year from 2025 to 2029. This pretty much also confirms that William Byron has signed a contract extension with Hendrick through 2029. His contract technically does go through the end of next year, but William Byron is pretty much now set with Valvoline sticking around. They'll sponsor Kyle Larson also for 3 races each year. Kyle Larson more than likely will also sign an extension in the coming years as well with Hendrick. This is a really, really huge pickup. Congratulations to them on getting an extension with Valvoline. Obviously, Hendrick Car is going to be a major association with Kyle Larson as well going forward, but it's really cool to see that Valvoline has signed an extension with Hendrick, and Hendrick continues to have some pretty loyal sponsors. Congratulations to them on getting this extension done. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Keller. As it was announced earlier today that Kyle Keller will make his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut at Watkins Glen later this year, driving for MBM Motorsports. Kyle Keller has made select starts in the ARCA Series so far this year and last year as well, and honestly has generally pretty good with those teams he's driven for. I think he's had a couple top 10 runs, and I think he's ran in the ARCA West Series as well. This is a really great opportunity for him. Obviously, if there's more entries showing up than cars that can make the race, he will have to try to make the field. I think he does have quite a bit of road course experience. If I'm not mistaken, I think he'll have a solid chance and an opportunity to make the show, and I think he'll do a pretty good job later this year at Watkins Glen. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Logan Bearden. As it was announced earlier today that Logan Bearden will be driving to 35 for Joey Gase Motorsports later this weekend at Nashville Super Speedway. Logan Bearden has made select starts in the NASCAR Xfinity Series so far this year, driving mainly for SS Greenlight Racing. So this will be the first time I think he's ran without SS Greenlight. Logan, extremely talented driver, always gets the best out of equipment. I go back to that race at Richmond earlier this year where he ran inside the top 20. It'd be really cool to eventually see him full-time in NASCAR in the future, but obviously sponsorship is going to play a big role for that to happen. Still, nonetheless, a really great opportunity, and I'm glad to see that he will be driving for JG Motorsports, Joey Gase Motorsports, this weekend at Nashville Super Speedway. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Josh Bilicki. As it was announced earlier this evening that Josh Bilicki will be driving the 92 for DGM Racing next week at the Chicago Street Course. It was already announced that Josh Bilicki will be driving the 66 for MBM Motorsports in the Cup Series, so he is going to be doing double duty next weekend. Josh Bilicki, a very talented road course racer. I think he's going to have a decent run actually with MBM, and I go back to Portland where he should have gotten a better finish than he got. I think with how good DGM's been, I wouldn't be surprised or shocked, especially with a star-studded lineup they're going to be in Xfinity. I think Josh Bilicki's going to have a very solid and good performance. I'm really looking forward to seeing him get this chance and opportunity. I think he's going to do an excellent and fantastic job with DGM next weekend at Chicago Street Course. Congratulations on the opportunity for him. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Meyer Shank Racing. As it was announced earlier today that Meyer Shank Racing will officially be returning to IMSA starting in 2025, driving for Acura once again. There have been rumors and speculation that Meyer Shank Racing was in fact going to be returning to IMSA in 2025, but nothing became official until today. So what does that mean for Wayne Taylor Racing? Well, there's a lot of rumors and chatter that Wayne Taylor Racing could either be going to Porsche or could potentially be going back to Cadillac next year. I think that's where they're going to end up. Tom Blomqvist is expected to be one of the drivers, part of the Meyer Shank Racing Group when this happens. This is a really great opportunity for them to make a return, and it's cool that Meyer Shank Racing is going to come back. We know Chip Ganassi Racing could potentially be going to Acura next year, as well as been rumors that they're potentially going over there. They've had talks and conversations. We'll kind of have to wait and see how things play out. But nonetheless, really awesome and glad to see that Meyer Shank Racing will officially be returning to IMSA and racing at Acura starting in 2025. By the way, this is a multi-year deal. Glad to see that this is going to be happening in 2025. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Toby Sowery. As it was announced yesterday that Toby Sowery will be driving to 51 for Dale Coyne Racing next week at Mid-Ohio, making his IndyCar Series debut. Toby Sowery, for those who don't know, has been racing, I think, in LMP2 or LMP3 in IMSA, and I think currently competes in Indy Lights as well, I think for CrowdStrike Racing. Toby, very talented driver. There's been a lot of drivers driving for Dale Coyne Racing this season. As usual with Dale Coyne Racing, you got to bring sponsorship funding if you're going to get a chance and an opportunity to race. I really hope Toby can do well on his debut. Dale Coyne's had some solid performances in the past at this racetrack especially, and I think he'll have a pretty good run. I think Charlie Kimball will be working with him pretty closely, and Charlie, of course, has won a Mid-Ohio in the past. So I really hope Toby can do a good job. It's a great opportunity nonetheless, and glad to see that Toby Sire will be able to make his IndyCar debut. Trust me, I think he'll do an excellent and great job in Mid-Ohio next weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Lance Stroll. As it was announced earlier today that Lance Stroll has signed a multi-year contract extension with Aston Martin, confirming that he'll be there not just in 2025, but for many years to come as well. This does not come as a shock or surprise. Lance Stroll is the son of Lawrence Stroll, who currently owns the Aston Martin organization in Formula One, who bought it up a few years ago. Lance, as much as I really don't care for Lance Stroll personally, I think Lance does have a little bit of talent behind him, but let's be real and honest, the only reason Lance is keeping this seat going into next year is because of the funding he has from his father and his father running the organization. I really hope that Lance can prove me wrong and do well, but like I said, I really don't expect him to unfortunately set the world on fire with Aston Martin going forward. You've got Fernando Alonso, who's outperforming in so many different levels, it's not even funny at this point. So I really hope Lance Stroll can really turn around and get it together, but at this point, I'm not entirely sure if it's going to happen. Again, I hope he proves me wrong, but right now, I'm not expecting much. I think he sadly will likely struggle with Aston Martin going forward, but he will stick around with the team in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Pierre Gasly. As it was also announced earlier today that Pierre Gasly has also signed a multi-year contract extension with Alpine from 2025 to probably 2026 or 2027. This has been expected that this was going to happen. We know Esteban Ocon will not be back with the team in 2025 as he's been linked to the Haas organization for next season. But many were expecting that Pierre Gasly was going to end up driving in the seat for 2025 once again. Pierre Gasly has had some solid runs this year at Alpine. He joined his team, I believe, this year. And generally, like I said, he's had some pretty solid and good performances with Alpine. But let's be real and honest, Alpine's an organization that's kind of struggled at points this season as well. They're looking to build up. They had a great performance this past weekend at the Spanish GP, trying to play the strategy, which kind of worked out for them. I think Pierre is a very talented driver. As for Esteban Ocon, like I said, I think he will end up at Haas, and not only Barron most likely is going to end up in the second seat, which means Kevin Madison likely will be out at the end of the year. There's talk he's probably going to be going endurance racing just like his father did. Great opportunity for Pierre Gasly, though. I really hope he can make the best of it and do a really good job with Alpine. Good opportunity, and see if he can continue being successful with the organization going forward in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Clint Bowyer. Now, Spire Motorsports put out a tweet in regards to Clint Bowyer. And if you actually watch this tweet, it basically indicates that Clint Bowyer will likely run his last Truck Series race later this evening. Remember, Clint Bowyer will be making his first truck start, I think, in 8 years, going back 2016 at Kansas. He'll be driving a 7 truck for Spire, and we'll have Rush Truck Centers as a sponsor, which, by the way, the paint scheme looks absolutely incredible. Now, Clint Bowyer has been very, very good at Nashville in the past. I think Clint Bowyer is actually going to have a legitimate chance to win this race later this evening. One, Spire Motorsports, one of the best organizations in the Truck Series. Nick Sanchez is technically aligned with the team, and he's already gotten 2 wins so far this year. Roger Krupp has also scored a win, and Kyle Busch has already won 2 races so far this season. 2, he's been great in Nashville. Great performances at this track. 1 year a couple times in the Xfinity Series. His average finish is like a 2.5 or 2.6. And I don't think he's had one finish outside the top 5 the entire time. He's been extremely impressive here. I think Clint Bowyer is going to have an excellent chance and a very strong opportunity to get it done. And I think he'll be a major threat and a serious contender to win this race, which, like I said, could be his final race, which if it truly is his last race running, it would be very, very unfortunate. But if this truly is Clint Bowyer's last race in NASCAR altogether, I hope he can go out on top and win. I don't know if he's going to win, but I think he does have a chance to for sure win this weekend at Nashville. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Suarez. As it was announced yesterday that Daniel Suarez will drive the 36 for DJM Racing next weekend at the Chicago Street Course. He will be teammates to Kyle Weatherman, who's going to drive the 91, and he will also be teammates to Josh Blickey, who will drive the 92, which we already talked about. This is definitely a little bit of a surprise, but we've seen Daniel Suarez do this in the past. Remember, I think he drove the 14 car for SS Greenlight Racing, which had colleague backing and support with them. But Daniel Suarez is going to have a good opportunity here. I think Daniel Suarez is a very good road course racer. And a lot of Daniel Suarez's success back in the day was, of course, in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And like I said, I think Daniel Suarez could have a good run. This 36 car, Preston Pardus and other drivers have generally been up front and done great in the past. My expectations is that not only Daniel Suarez will be able to make the show pretty easily, but I think Daniel Suarez will be contending at least for a top 5 or top 10 because there's going to be a lot of great Cup drivers. Obviously, Shaman Gisbergen's running, Kyle Larson is running, I think Ty Gibbs is running the event. You've got a lot of other good road course races like AJ Allmendinger, and even drivers like Haley Dean, of course, will be competing in the event as well. I think Daniel Suarez will have a very solid performance, and I'm looking forward to see he'll get the chance and opportunity, because I do believe that Daniel Suarez will have a pretty good chance and opportunity to be extremely competitive at Chicago. I think he for sure will be up front at the Chicago Street Course with DJM Racing next weekend. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rodney Childers. Now, we're going to talk about silly season with the drivers here in just a little bit. But Rodney Childers won Series 7 NASCAR Radio yesterday with Daniel Trotta and I believe Larry McReynolds as well. And Rodney Childers is hoping to be working with Josh Berry in 2025. Rodney Childers and Josh Berry have been gelling really well together throughout the last couple weeks. Josh Berry has jumped from basically 21st or 22nd in standings to all the way up to 9th to up to 20th in the points, only 72 or 73 points below the cutoff line. And in the last 5 or 6 weeks, he's had 3 top 10 finishes. Josh Berry and his 4 team are really starting to gel together. And Josh has even said this as well. He wants to bring Rodney Childers wherever he goes. We know Josh Berry is a current favorite right now to go over to the Wood Brothers. If you have Rodney Childers and Josh Berry on the same organization, I think both individuals are going to be extremely successful. I think Josh Berry will be really good. I know we've kind of talked about Harrison Burton, right? But Harrison Burton has absolutely struggled with the Wood Brothers in recent years, and that 21 car should be running a lot better than it's been running. I think if you absolutely put Rodney Childers as a crew chief and working with the team, I think that is going to work absolutely well and work wonders for the organization and team. So I think it will actually help in a big way, and I truly do believe that if Josh, like I said, Rodney Childers should be picked up. He's probably the biggest free agent of anybody, including the drivers currently at the moment. If I'm an organization and team, and I see that Rodney Childers is absolutely available, I'm going for him. So I really hope it ends up happening where Rodney Childers and Josh Berry are working together. If not, if RSR becomes available for Noah Gragson to go over there, I'm bringing Rodney Childers over there. So we'll see what happens and we'll see what goes forward. But I think Rodney Childers and Josh Berry need to work together going into next series. I think both would be successful, and I don't want to separate them because both have done an excellent job overall together, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about JD Motorsports. Now, if you've been on social media over the last week or so, there was a post put out by JD Motorsports. Robert Dorman, or R. Dorman, on social media put out a tweet basically with the rain going on the racetrack at New Hampshire. And basically it showed the Hawk Tuamine. Now, for those who do not know the Hawk Tuamine, I'm not really going to explain it. And the tweet got a lot of recognition from a lot of fans, and a lot of fans are really happy. Well, all of a sudden, Dorman puts out a tweet saying, I'm basically done on the social media page. It was fun knowing you all. Now, it does need to be noted that Dorman is still working as a tire changer at the organization and has not been fired. Well, JD Motorsports and Johnny Davis actually released a statement in regards to the situation, and I'm going to be real and frank here. This statement is absolutely horrendous. It is not very good in my opinion. Basically, he brought up a lot of things that should not have been brought up, especially children. Number one, why are you talking about your child on your post? That's really got nothing to do with it. Just say that if you didn't like the post and didn't meet your standards. Fine, that's understandable, but you didn't need to release a statement that you ended up releasing. One, and personally in my opinion, I feel like the statement was very harmless and didn't basically need to be taken down personally. It was a very innocent joke. Again, if you didn't like it, you could have given Dorman a warning and not forced him to take it down and basically taken him off. I thought this statement was a complete overreaction by Johnny Davis. Again, I get you want to keep your company image, but at the same token, at the same time, look at all the other organizations that let their people on social media run. Look at College Racing. Look at RFK. They allow the people on their organization to run the social media and have fun with it. And they usually have a lot of fun, and it's very, very successful. JD Motorsports, meanwhile, is an organization that's generally been struggling. They've kicked their drivers out in multiple different races despite signing full-time contracts with their drivers. And generally, it's just not a good environment overall. So to me, I really didn't like the statement. I thought it was a complete overreaction by Johnny Davis. I didn't agree with it. And like I said, I think it was 100% a complete overreaction. And I think Johnny should just have never released a statement. And I think it was overall, like I said, a really bad statement by Johnny Davis, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about College Racing. As it was reported by Dustin Albino of NASCAR.com and J-Ski that he actually spoke to Chris Rice from College Racing, of course, is the president of College Racing. And Chris Rice basically said that they are having a hard reset at College Racing. And he basically compared Nashville to their Daytona, which is a little surprising considering their success usually comes at road courses and super speedways. But they basically said they're having a hard reset and they are targeting this race to be where everything kind of turns around. Let's look at College Racing as a whole this year. College Racing has generally struggled in 2025, at least on the NASCAR Cup Series program. Both their cars, I believe, are outside of the top 30 in the points, and they don't have a driver lineup set for 2025 currently at the moment. They're looking for sponsorship right now at this particular moment for both those cars. So Dale Hemrick does bring a little funding, so I think there's a good chance he's going to stick around with College Racing in 2025. But their Xfinity program was also taking a big step backwards. Coming into this year, I had AJ Allmendinger being the winningest driver or close to being the winningest driver. AJ Allmendinger has not won a race so far in 2024, and he struggled immensely. Meanwhile, he could have been a Cup and still been extremely competitive. But SVG, he's a rookie, and he's been doing a solid job this year. He's in the playoffs, I think, on legitimate points right now, tied for the last position, and has 2 wins so far this year, but both of them are on road courses. Meanwhile, Josh Williams has struggled immensely. He's had some good runs this year, and I think he's in the top 20 in the standings, but Josh Williams has just not performed very good, in my opinion. So they really need to take a back step, and they need to realize that they need to make some big moves. They lost a lot of sponsorship. They lost AG1, they lost Nutrient Solutions over the offseason, and they lost other companies like Andy's Frozen Custard, who's now working with Cole Custer, and they've got a custard brand with him. I think they need to really take a big step back and realize where the problems lie. They're basically trying to be this team that's a top-level organization that really was never a top-level organization. If I was called with their Cup Series program, I would 100% go ahead and sell a charter. I think that would be the best thing that they could do to at least fix some of their problems in their Xfinity program and their Cup program as well. Are they going to do that? I think they're going to be too stubborn and not do it. But like I said, if they were smart and they wanted to make the right business decision, I'd be right now selling a charter in Cup and giving it to a team like Trackhouse or giving it to a team like 2311 that's on the up and up, or RCR that wants to expand as well. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with the future College Racing. But like I mentioned, already said, they really do need to go ahead and focus on fixing things. I really hope this hard reset that they're having can fix some of those things and have some solutions toward the future. But right now, I'm just not seeing it. I don't know if that's going to fix some of the problems that College Racing has, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Chris Gabehart. Now, Chris Gabehart very recently was on the Happy Harvick podcast that Kevin Harvick does. We talked about a couple days ago with SHR that basically Stuart Haas Racing had an opportunity to pick up Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch, and that, of course, did not end up happening. But Chris Gabehart, of course, the crew chief for Denny Hamlin, spoke about the intricacies of the next-gen car and explained some of the next-gen issues, and I found them very interesting. He talks about how everyone basically gets the same parts in the same pieces. And he says this all sounds good, right? Because everyone can be very equal and upfront every time. He says the problem is, though, is that it exposed a lot of issues when it comes to dirty air and other problems with the car, everything being equal. And he brought up some very interesting suggestions as well. One thing is making a lower profile tire. Another thing is adding a little bit of horsepower as well. Could fix some of the problems. The big problem with the next-gen car is this car has made everything very equal. But if you've noticed, most of this year, it's been won by two organizations, Joe Gibbs Racing and Hendrick Motorsports. Both organizations have won, I believe, a combined 13 of the 18 points paying races. Now, granted, Team Penske's caught up a little bit and they're much quicker. RFK's look pretty good with Brad Keselowski, and Chris Buescher probably should have a win or two this year. And Tyler Reddick has already won one race so far, and he could get a second win by the end of this season. Dave's absolutely right, by the way. They need to make changes to the next-gen car. I think adding horsepower would fix some of the issues 100%, but I think getting less S&T data to be available to the teams and drivers, I think would be another farther step that I would go with personally. I think the S&T data is really playing a big role. I get S&T data can be good for your own organization and team, but I think having all this S&T data available to these teams, I think is making it so much more easier, and I don't want that to be the case. I think all these teams can now look at it, and I think that is a big problem for sure as well. So I really hope going forward they can find a way to get rid of some of these issues with the S&T data. That's one thing that needs to absolutely happen, especially going forward into the future. So we'll see what happens in regards to that. But like I said, I 100% agree. I think that these teams do get too big of an advantage, and I think there needs to be less an advantage to these teams going forward. I really hope it ends up happening. Is it going to happen? I don't know at this point, but definitely there should not be as much S&T data that is going out to these teams. I think it's making it way too easy for these teams, and they can just copy what other teams are doing, in my opinion. And now we'll go ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Chicago Street Course once again. Now, we've talked a little bit about some drivers that are going to be running in the Chicago Street Course, but we need to talk about the future. So Adam Stern has been putting out a lot of articles and a lot of tweets, or quoting some of these tweets and putting them out. And there was an article that came out from the Chicago Tribune, and it was mentioned in this article that the future is a little uncertain with the Chicago Street Course, and they're not going to make a decision on the Chicago Street Course until basically the event concludes for this year. Now, obviously, they have a 3-year contract with the Chicago Street Course, that being NASCAR. And their contract is supposed to go through 2025. Now, they can, if they want to, sign a 2-year extension through 2027 if they are able to go through. But there's been rumors and chatter that some people have been circulating on social media in recent months that this could actually be the last year at the Chicago Street Course. Now, I'm going to be real and honest. Going into this event last year, I was very, very skeptical of the race. I didn't think the racing was going to be that good. I thought it wasn't going to be great. And unfortunately, the weather played a big damper. But I'm going to be real. I am a lot more positive, and I hope that the Chicago Street Course can come back in 2025. If it doesn't come back in 2025, what happens from there? Well, there is a perfectly fit track in Joliet, Illinois, that being Chicagoland, is ready to be run. I think that's where we end up in 2025. And we've been seeing some things recently where there's some job applications that have been popping up multiple different times. And that indicates to me they might know something about the future of Chicago. And I truly do believe that Chicagoland would be an excellent track to go to for racing. The next-gen car puts on phenomenal racing there, and I think it would do really good. Look at Kansas. It's kind of similar to Kansas, and the racing in Kansas has been absolutely phenomenal and incredible. And if you put the racing at Chicagoland, I think it's going to be absolutely amazing and fantastic there. So I really would love to see it end up happening where that could be the case where we're racing at Chicagoland if we don't race at Chicago Street Course. I do think a street course race needs to be on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule, however. I think it should be. I think the racing generally was solid, though I don't think the racing is going to be as good because the next-gen car does not race fantastically. I think Denver would be a really good market to go to, and we've seen Pittsburgh is also interested as well. We're going to have to wait and see how this story falls up and see if it does come back. I think there's a very strong chance, and I know Private Porno commented as well, they do think it would be a bad move if it wasn't back on the schedule. I do agree. I think it should have one more year on the schedule, but then after 2025, go to Chicagoland, 100%. If you can't do it this year, next year I should say, you go to Chicagoland. Personally, I want to see Chicagoland back on the schedule, and again, I really hope it does end up happening in 2025, but I also hope the street course can also come back in 2025 as well. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Bowman Gray. Now, Jordan Bianchi released an article in regards to the 2025 NASCAR schedule. We already talked about Chicago Street Course a little bit, but that really wasn't mentioned in the Jordan Bianchi article. What was mentioned was about the playoff dates and also Bowman Gray. According to Jordan Bianchi, Bowman Gray is expected to host the Clash in 2025 and not Daytona. There has been rumors and chatter that Bowman Gray was going to host the Clash for 2025, and it sounded like that was very, very likely, not just like a low possibility, that it was very likely this is going to end up happening. Now, personally, and this is just my opinion, I'm fine with Bowman Gray getting a date on the NASCAR schedule. However, I feel like that this would have been a lot more reserved for the All-Star race. But we already know that North Wilkesboro is going to be hosting the All-Star race once again in 2025. And again, I kind of don't really agree with it, to be honest, because I think North Wilkesboro should get a points-paying date. Again, do I think that fans are going to show up to Bowman Gray? Absolutely. The track only hosts, to my understanding, like 17 or 18,000 seats. So I think that Bowman Gray absolutely would fit that criteria to go ahead and fit. So I think that does make a little sense there. As for some other things to note in the schedule, Mexico City and Montreal are basically fighting for that international date to replace the Richmond Spring Day. I think that it will be won by Mexico City. A lot of people are expecting that that is going to end up happening where Mexico City gets a day, which I think an international race makes a lot of sense. I would love to see them go to Montreal, and it'd be cool to have both tracks basically host a date next year, but I think only having one also makes a ton of sense as well. It sounds like Mexico City is going to get the date. Finally, playoff tracks, where I know the Homestead's going out next year most likely. Same with Watkins Glen, and same with Atlanta. And we are expecting the 3 tracks to go in, our Darlington Gateway, and basically the other one being New Hampshire. New Hampshire, I question a little bit. I think Gateway makes a ton of sense personally. I like Gateway. It's a fantastic facility to go to. I know there's some things they need to work on with the internet, among other things, and power. Considering it's technology, they shouldn't be having issues with internet and the power grid, but I think that's something they can absolutely work on. I think Homestead going out sucks, but I understand what they think they're doing. And Gateway going in is a big reason for that as well. The IndyCar race got moved to June 15th, so that's another big reason why Gateway is going to be going in the playoffs. Again, 6 flat tracks or 6 tracks that haven't produced the greatest racing with the next-gen car. I do question that a little bit, to be honest, but at the same token, at the same time, it does make a lot of sense. As for when the schedule is expected to be released, according to what Bob has reported earlier this evening, it sounds like it is going to be in the second week of July, but it continues to get pushed back. I think this is holding up, the Chicago Street Course is holding up the schedule getting released a little bit, and I think some other things like the date going international is holding up the schedule from being released as well. We're going to be following the story as time goes on and more schedule stuff gets released, but trust me, I do think there's going to be more schedule stuff that is going to be announced in the not-so-distant future, and we're just going to have to wait for things to play out and see how things end up going out. Be very interesting and fun to watch. I think there's going to be more details coming out soon in regards to the 2025 schedule. Multiple reporters are reporting that the schedule's coming out soon, and we'll hear more about the 2025 schedule in the not-so-distant future. I do expect the schedule announcement probably by the end of next month. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Aric Almirola and Bubba Wallace. As it was officially reported by Jordan Bianchi earlier today that Aric Almirola was indefinitely at the time suspended by Joe Gibbs Racing. Now, Aric Almirola is expected to make a return to Joe Gibbs Racing at Indianapolis this next month on July 20 for the NASCAR Xfinity race. Will drive the number 20 car. Now, why was Aric Almirola suspended from Joe Gibbs Racing? Well, according to Jordan Bianchi and all the reports coming out, he apparently got into an altercation with Bubba Wallace during a competition meeting. Now, this is a rumor that's circulated on Twitter from, I think, NASCAR Prophecy, and we really didn't get all the full details, but Toby Christie reached out to Joe Gibbs and said that rumor basically was not true at the time and basically said it was very unfounded. But now you've got multiple sources that are telling Jordan Bianchi that this rumor is actually true. Now, initially when people saw this, they thought that Bubba Wallace was likely the instigator. Well, according to Jordan Bianchi, according to him, Aric Almirola was the instigator. Now, it's unclear what was said in this competition meeting, correct? But we are hearing that Aric Almirola was the instigator of the feud that ended up taking place. Now, obviously, Bubba Wallace and Aric Almirola have not liked each other for a very, very long time. You have to go all the way back to 2018 when Bubba Wallace took over the 43 car for Aric Almirola and Aric Almirola went over to Super Haas Racing to drive the 10 car. At that time, also, Bubba Wallace had substituted for Aric Almirola in 2017 when Aric Almirola had that injury after Kansas, where unfortunately he had a very bad back injury. Bubba took over the 43 car, and basically that is where all the feud started. Then he fast forward all the way to last year where they got into an altercation in a shoving match at the Coca-Cola 600 right about the time they got back in their car on the Monday. Apparently it was from some contact that took place down the back straightaway, and there was some contact that took place, and they got into a very big feud. And Bubba said that Aric Almirola's two-faced. Aric said in his post-race interview that he said he started cussing at him, that being Bubba Wallace, at Aric Almirola, flipping him off down the back straightaway. And now we fast forward to here. When I heard this rumor, I did not believe it at the time. I didn't think this rumor was actually real. But the fact that this rumor is actually real and they both got into a fight is absolutely wild and absolutely crazy. And it makes a lot of sense why Joe Gibbs suspended Aric Almirola, especially with the fact that Aric Almirola was the instigator. Obviously, when people see Bubba Wallace in any sort of comment section or whatever, they're instantly going to blame Bubba for certain situations. Now, Bubba Wallace does have a temper, do not get me wrong. But at the same time, Aric Almirola has not liked Bubba Wallace for a very, very long time. And if he truly got suspended for this, it makes a lot of sense why he got suspended. I know there was brought up, I think, basically on Denny Hamlin's podcast, Action Detrimental, that apparently at one point Carl Edwards Cobblers almost got into a shoving match many years ago. I think Aric mentioned in his video as well. But basically, when I look at the situation, right, you're going to get a lot of questions that are asked, and Bubba's probably going to have to answer to the media, unfortunately, in regards to the situation, right? Because he's going to have to respond basically what exactly went down between both you guys during this competition meeting. Again, it does need to be noted and clear that Aric Almirola is going to make a return. It seems like it wasn't serious enough for him to get completely fired because everyone was saying that Aric Almirola was not going to be returning at all to Joe Gibbs Racing. But basically, it just made a lot of sense because Aric was taken out of the car, and he's supposed to run New Hampshire. He didn't run that. I think Ty Gibbs took over for that race, if I remember correctly, or John Hunter took over. And then, of course, this past week, basically earlier this year at Charlotte, he basically had his ride taken over by Ty Gibbs, and everyone's starting to question why was Aric Almirola on the seat because this race was initially on his schedule. Aric Almirola does have Indianapolis on his schedule still, and he does have Watkins Glen on the schedule later this year because of the Gold Bowling sponsorship. So Aric will be back behind the wheel. Look, if Aric Almirola was the instigator in the situation, it seems like it's very true that he was the instigator, then Aric Almirola deserves a lot of crap. One, you're basically being part-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. You've been good this year. You have won a race. Bubba has not won a cup race yet, but Bubba's been up front competing for wins at the time. You basically started the instigation and the fight. So if you're the one that's starting to fight, you are at fault. The one that instigates, in my opinion, is taking more of the blame. I don't think Bubba Wallace really deserves a lot of flack for this, and I really hope he doesn't get a lot of flack. But unfortunately, there's been a certain side of social media today, among other things, that has been going after Bubba Wallace, and I really, like I said, don't think he truly deserves the flack that he's been getting on social media. Anytime Bubba Wallace comes up, you get that. But for me, Aric Almirola's more for fault. I like both drivers, don't get me wrong. Both are very, very talented. But Aric Almirola's back in Xfinity for a reason. He basically wasn't as good in Cup the last few years. He did have some good performances. He did win that race in New Hampshire at SHR. But let's be real and frank and honest. I kind of have to believe what Jordan Bianchi reported. I think that Bubba Wallace was not at fault for it. Initially, people thought that Bubba Wallace was at fault for the situation and fight. It actually turns out that it was the other way around, that Aric Almirola instigated the fight and the feud. I do expect questions to be asked this weekend in Nashville, and when Aric Almirola does make his official return at Indianapolis, if he does truly come back in Indy, I do truly believe that there's going to be some questions that are asked. So we'll save for some more details to come out, see what Bubba Wallace releases to the media this weekend, but we now know why Aric Almirola was gone, and it's very shocking, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR silly season. Now, Bob Pockrass put out an article in regards to where he thinks and projects drivers are going to end up in the Cup Series in 2025. Before getting that article, though, it is noted that Ryan Preece spoke to the media this past weekend, and there's a lot of talk and chatter that Ryan Preece could potentially be headed to the Haas factory team in 2025. He did say to Kimmy Kuhn this past week at New Hampshire that he's working on his future for 2025, and he's likely not going to be back in the Cup Series next year. Many believe he's going to be headed over to the Haas factory team in 2025. Let's talk about all the drivers that are on the silly season market, beginning by Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace is expected, according to Bob Pockrass, to sign a multi-year contract extension with 23XI Racing. This is a contract year for Bubba to be at the organization and team, but Bubba is expected to sign an extension. He's been doing a very solid job at 23XI this year. Yes, he's currently below the cutoff line, but he's had a lot of great performances. I think 4 top 5s and like 5 top 10s or 6 top 10s this year. Bubba's been doing a really solid job this year, and I expect him to get better as the year progresses and goes on. he will sign a multi-year extension with 2311 Racing in the not-so-distant future. As for that third 2311 Racing seat, it's between two drivers currently at the moment. It's between Corey Heim, who will drive the 50 car this week in a National Super Speedway, and Riley Herbst. A lot of people are starting to believe that Riley Herbst has basically purchased the charter that 2311 Racing has, and they're bringing it over and helping fund. Riley Herbst has sponsorship from Monster Energy, and there's been rumors that Monster might be backing out of Joe Gibbs Racing altogether, potentially with Kroger coming in to work with JGR next season. And they could be moving all that Monster money over to 2311. Now, if I had to choose between Corey Heim and Riley Herbst, this is no disrespect, but I'm going to go with Corey Heim any given day. Corey Heim is a more deserving driver, but if sponsorship comes into play, you kind of sadly you're going to have to unfortunately take Riley Herbst. Again, I personally would choose Corey Heim because he's won 4 truck races. He's probably going to win the race later tonight, but I also think there is a chance that we could see Riley Herbst get the seat. He is one of the frontrunners for that 2311 Racing seat. It also is noted that Austin Cindric has not signed an extension with Team Penske, but it is expected that with his win that he got at Gateway a couple weeks ago, he will get an extension with Team Penske. I'm a little shocked that he's not officially signed at this point, considering he is son of Tim Cindric, but obviously we know the whole push-to-pass situation in IndyCar between Tim Cindric, where he got suspended for multiple weeks. I think that's why that hasn't been done, but it's expected that Austin Cindric will get an extension. Let's now talk about Trackhouse Racing. We know that Daniel Suarez is expected to sign a multi-year contract extension with Trackhouse Racing, and we all know Ross is saying it's set through at least 2025 or 2026. The big question right now with Trackhouse Racing is who do you choose between Shane Van Gisbergen and Zane Smith? Well, rumors are suggesting at this moment that SVG is likely going to get the seat over Zane Smith. Shane has been doing a really good job in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this season, already 2 victories, and of course he does have that Cup win at Chicago last year, and I think he has a good chance to sweep the weekend at Chicago next week. SVG's got sponsorship as well, and Trackhouse is really liking the progress that Shane is making. He's been getting better as the year progresses and goes on. He's only had 4 finishes outside the top 20. 2 of those, by the way, a little bit questionable. The one with the fuel issues at Talladega and also the penalty got at Coda. I think it was a lot of BS, but SVG is the favorite to take over the seat. What happens to Zane? Does he get farmed out to Kaulig? That could certainly be a possibility. He could go to the 16 car. Speaking of Kaulig Racing, they don't know what their plans are yet for 2025. If AJ Allmendinger can get the funding and sponsorship, he could be full-time at Kaulig next year. But it sounds like it's up for debate on what's going to happen at Kaulig in 2025. There are rumors that they could still sell a charter, despite the fact that Chris Rice said they're not planning to sell a charter currently at the moment. There is a chance they could sell a charter at the end of the year. As for Daniel Hemrick, I thought Daniel Hemrick was officially safe, but according to Bob Pockers, Daniel Hemrick has not signed an extension yet, and it's all going to come down to funding. But I do think that Daniel Hemrick will likely be back at Kaulig Racing next year. If he doesn't go back, I think this is where Zane Smith is going to end up in 2025. I think that would be a better choice anyways at this point, considering Zane, I think, is a better driver than Daniel Hemrick right now. Hemrick's been mediocre, only had 2 top 10s so far this year, and has generally struggled quite a bit. Now let's talk about Austin Dillon. Despite the fact that Austin Dillon did sign a 3-year extension, it's not been officially clear if he did sign that extension or not. Many are expecting that Austin Dillon is going to stay in the 3 car in 2025, but now with the whole situation with RCR changing the competition rules over there, many are beginning to speculate that Austin Dillon could retire at the end of the year and go into more of a competition role at Richard Childress Racing. Austin Dillon, this is no disrespect, but I feel like that he should probably give his seat up and go into a competition role. He's been struggling the last year or so. Justin Alexander came in and began crew chiefing that seat, and it really has not led to a lot of amazing and very good results currently at the moment. So I think, sadly, Austin Dillon's future is very uncertain, but I do think there's a good chance he's going to be back in the 3 car next year. A driver that could end up at Richard Childress Racing next season is Noah Gragson. Noah Gragson is the front runner for 2 teams currently at the moment. Those 2 organizations are Rich Childress Racing and Front Row Motorsports. Many people bring up the Front Row connection, but not Front Row, the RCR connection, because of the Bass Pro connection. Bass Pro Shops is expected to stick around with Noah Gragson next season, even though they're going to be staying at Joe Gibbs Racing to work with Chase Briscoe next year. However, for Noah Gragson to go over to RCR, they are going to need a charter for that to happen. And unless Kaulig Racing sells a charter, I think that's going to be really difficult to happen, which is why many people are believing that Noah Gragson is currently the lead candidate to get one of the front row seats. I think this actually would be a really good option for Noah Gragson Gragson, and I'm looking at front row and RCR, front row is in a better position. They are expanding going into 2025, and Noah Gragson would be a fantastic and great option to go with next season if they were to win with him. Now, he does have some sponsorship from Bass Pro Shops and Black Rifle Coffee, and if Love stick around, let's say, for the 34th seat next year, Noah Gragson may not have to bring as much funding, and I think Noah would be very, very good at Front Row Motorsports. Some other drivers that are shockingly candidates for this organization next year are Sam Mayer and Christian Eckes. Both of the drivers, by the way, that I did not think were going to be intentionally in the Ford camp, perhaps. Sam Mayer's obviously really pushing to go Cup racing in 2025. Sam Mayer's really wanting to move up. He's tied for the most wins with John Hunter Nemechek in the NASCAR Xfinity Series over the last 30 to 31 races. And I think Sam Mayer would be a fantastic and great option to go with if you were to move him up. But does he get help from Dale Jr.? That could be a possibility. Christian Eckes, we've been hearing rumors and speculation that he could be moving up. I thought maybe he could go to Colleague next year, and he could still go to Colleague on a part-time basis next year. But Christian Eckes is in the running for a front row seat. That surprises me quite a bit, but I'm not entirely shocked by that situation. Now let's talk about Erik Jones. According to Bob Pockers, Erik Jones is still not signing a contract extension with Legacy Motor Club. Now, he is expected to sign a contract extension potentially. He apparently can go talk to any teams he wants to, but the problem is what teams are available at this point. There's not a lot of really good options out there right now for Erik Jones to go with, so I think he likely will stay at Legacy Motor Club in the 43. If not, Corey Heim is the front runner to replace him next season. If Legacy expands, we could see Corey Heim go there. Now let's talk about Ricker Racing. We know that they're talking about trying to bring a driver with full funding. Kaz Grall's driven a majority of the season in that number 15 car. I think that there's a chance that there's going to be some surprises going to that 15 car. Could Haley Deegan move up? Potentially, but probably not at this point. What about someone out of the open, out of nowhere? Like Matt DiBenedetto, like a J.J. Yeley coming back. That could be a possibility. Now let's talk about Justin Haley. Justin Haley said very recently he's committed to Rick Ware, but there's been rumors and speculation at one point he was a contender for the Wood Brothers seat. He could go to a third RFK seat next year, and he could also go potentially to a third 2311 racing seat next year. I think he's going to stick around with Rick Ware and wait for RFK to open up a third car. That's my early prediction right now. I think he sticks around with Rick Ware, but the factor seems looking at him is because his performance has been exceptional over Rick Ware Racing, which is why he could be on the move in the future. And finally, before we're going back to 2311, let's talk about Josh Berry. Josh Berry is a lead candidate right now for the Wood Brothers car. Noah Gragson was at one point the lead candidate, and Chase Briscoe, before signing the contract with JGR, he was a lead candidate. But Josh Berry is the front-running lead candidate right now to take over the 21 car next year. Harrison Burton, I think, is going to the Haas factory team in the Xfinity Series. Same with Ryan Preece. As for the other Haas factory car, I think that goes to Cole Custer. But Josh Berry is bringing a little funding with him, and I think the Dale Jr. connection is going to help. I think that 21 car is a lot better than what it's been showing in recent years of Harrison Burton. It's no disrespect to Harrison, but Harrison Burton is not cut out for a Cup ride at this point, at least unless it's on a part-time basis. I think Josh Berry will likely end up in the seat in 2025. And you got to look at the other factor, too, with 2311. They could have 4 cars next year because we know Mark Truex Jr. is in negotiations to drive part-time for 2311. But who else could drive that 2311 car? Chandler Smith, potentially. Someone out of nowhere like a Corey Heim, perhaps, if Heim doesn't go full-time. Carl Edwards or Kurt Busch come out of retirement. That could be a possibility. What about Kamui Kobayashi? That could certainly be an option as well. This silly season is going to continue to get wild as it goes on, and I think there's a lot of big moves that are coming very, very soon. Going back to Noah Gragson, I think he's going to be a front row RCR in 2025. So that is going to today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. Where do you think Noah Gragson ends up next year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and what are your thoughts about the altercation between Bubba Wallace and Aric Almirola? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I do have a Truck Series race review dropping later tonight. If any major news breaks throughout the day, we'll discuss it here live on the channel. Tomorrow, we're going to have reactions to Cup qualifying at Nashville for that new format that just came out very recently. We're going to have the Xfinity Series race review and the Shane Van Gisbergen video as well, depending on how he performs at Nashville. And then on Sunday, we'll have the NASCAR Cup Series race review and a starting lineup for the Ally 400. And then Monday, we should have a NASCAR news video dropping. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.